The excess mortality rate is way down and much lower than almost any other country. And we're fighting it, and we're fighting it hard. There is a spike.
And what we heard from the president was pretty much what we have been hearing from the president, which was a just trust me, happy days are almost here again kind of message.
There was a very big spike in Arizona. It's now gone. And there are some spikes and surges in other places. They will soon be gone. And we have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready.
Promising a vaccine was right around the corner and saying that, the most important thing was that the country not be locked down again.
I can tell you from personal experience that I was in the hospital. I had it, and I got better.
And he invoked his own hospitalization. This happened, of course, right after the first presidential debate as sort of a case study in why things are getting better, that there are therapies that didn't exist. Never mind the fact that most Americans obviously can't get the kind of health care that he got.
Okay, former Vice President Biden, to you, how would you lead the country out of this crisis? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
220,000 Americans dead.
From there, we go over to Joe Biden, and it's just a totally different reality.
The expectation is we'll have another 200,000 Americans dead between now and the end of the year. If we just wore these masks, the president's own advisors have told him, we could save 100,000 lives.
That normalcy is not right around the corner, and that in order to get us there needs to be a much more robust federal response on the virus on a number of levels.
I will take care of this. I will end this. I will make sure we have a plan.
And I think we see in this exchange Biden delivering, I think, his most direct, his bluntest critique of the night against the president, just saying anybody who presides over this many American deaths can't be reelected.
You also said a vaccine will be coming within weeks.
Yes.
Is that a guarantee?
No, it's not a guarantee, but it will be by the end of the year. But I think
Alex, during these exchanges, unlike in that first debate, the president never interrupts Joe Biden.
Let's talk about schools. President Trump,
I think we have to respond, if I might.
Please, and then I have a follow-up.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
And I'm curious, What's your understanding of what's behind that change in tone from the Trump campaign? Is it possible the president's poll numbers were pretty bad after that first debate? Was there an instruction he received from his advisors, do we think, that he needed to stop that particular kind of behavior, that it was alienating voters? What was happening?
Really all of the above. You know, the president came out of that first debate thinking he did well and was sort of steadily, I don't know that he was fully disabused of that notion, but there was really a mood of panic across the Republican Party after that first debate. And look, the president has not been delivering a focused campaign message on the trail. He has not been making a strong affirmative case for his reelection, but he has been hearing from his advisors and from other Republicans that if he takes it to Biden while coloring inside the lines a little bit more in terms of the basic rules of the debate and the basic parameters of what Americans like to see from a president, that maybe his message would be more effective.
And part of that focused message seemed to involve a little bit of unexpected humility from the president. He took responsibility for the coronavirus in an exchange, and that threw me a little bit.
Are we dangerous? You tell the people it's dangerous now? What should they do about the danger? And you say, I take no responsibility.
It threw me too, and I think it was a little bit of a rhetorical acrobatics from the president in that he said,
Talk about your two
Excuse me, I take full responsibility.
I take responsibility.
It's not my fault that he came here. It's China's fault. And you know what? It's not Joe's fault that he came here either. It's China's fault.
And then immediately said, basically, this is on China. But you're right that we haven't heard him even use those words before, even in this, somewhat evasive intent.
And on this question of tone, I think everyone was waiting for Donald Trump to go after Biden very early and very hard on this very controversial reporting that's come out in the New York Post about Biden's son, Hunter, how he made his money overseas. But interestingly, it was not Trump who really initiated that discussion.
That's right. This was an interesting moment at the beginning of the second section of the debate, which was
All right, we're going to move on to our next section, which is national security.
focused on foreign interference in American elections.
This question goes to you, Mr. Vice President. What would you do to put an end to this threat? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
I made it clear, and I ask everyone else to take the pledge. I made it clear that any country, no matter who it is, that interferes in American elections will pay a price.
Then the first question goes to Biden, and he uses it to issue a warning to foreign countries like Russia, like Iran, to say, if you meddle in our elections, you will pay a price for it.
But the point is this, folks. We are in a situation where we have foreign countries trying to interfere in the outcome of our election. His own national security advisor told him that what is happening with his buddy...
And then he goes a little bit further, and he alludes to information that is being spread around in the U.S. and to the president's, he refers to him as the president's buddy, Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani has been one of the key people involved in stoking these stories in places like the New York Post that are purportedly sourced to private emails that Giuliani claims to have obtained. But of course, we know that Rudy Giuliani spent time earlier this year in Eastern Europe sort of seeking information there from questionable sources. And so, Biden starts to bring up Giuliani.
Well, I won't. I shouldn't. Well, I will. His buddy, Rudy Giuliani, he's being used as a Russian pawn. He's being
And you see him
fed
kind of catch
information
himself
that
as
is
though he
Russian.
realizes,
That is not
that's your rebuttal. That's not something you're supposed to do preemptively. But then he decides to go ahead with it and says, that Giuliani is potentially being used as a Russian pawn.
Well, let me respond to the first part as Joe answered. Joe got $3.5 million from Russia, and it came through Putin because he was very friendly with the former mayor of Moscow, and it was the mayor of Moscow's wife. And you got $3.5 million. Your family got $3.5 million.
And the president essentially seizes an opening that he was obviously waiting for, or perhaps would have tried to create on his own, to then spend much of the next segment of the debate just poking and prodding at these allegations about Joe Biden's son.
But now, with what came out today, it's even worse. All of the emails, the horrible emails of the kind of money that you were raking in, you and your family. And Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening, and it should have never happened.
Right. This was clearly one of the most anticipated subjects of this debate. And Trump does seize on it, like you said, but in what for him felt like oddly polite terms.
He takes a sort of insinuating approach rather than the sort of double-barreled smear that is so characteristic of the way he does politics, sort of outlining what he says or these questions that have just surfaced. Of course, he does not acknowledge what the sourcing is and the questions about the provenance and the reliability of the reports and the involvement of his personal allies. But he says,
and I think you owe an explanation to the American people. Why is it? Somebody just had a news conference a little while ago who was essentially supposed to work with you and your family, but what he said was damning. And regardless of me, I think you have to clean it up and talk to the American people. Maybe you can do it right now.
Joe, you need to explain yourself. Why do you have these foreign entanglements? And he says several times, and we have no reason to believe this is the case, that Biden personally profited from his son's business dealings, which is something that Biden has consistently denied in the past and denied again in the debate this evening. But, I agree with you that it clearly was, in both parties, it was seen by advisors of the president as one of his worst moments in the first debate, when he went after Hunter Biden in an effort to just humiliate the former vice president and talked, not just about Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings, but about his battles with substance abuse, about his discharge from the military, in a way that was just seen, I think even by people who were not going to vote for Joe Biden, as just mean-spirited and low. And it did seem like there was at least some sensitivity tonight that, if you're going to try to smear Joe Biden on, thin ethical attacks, that there are limits even to what you can do there.
We're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about immigration now, gentlemen.
So then the debate returns, and for the most part remains pretty focused on substantive policy discussion like immigration.
But the United States can't locate the parents of more than 500 children. So how will these families ever be reunited?
This, to me, is maybe one of the most interesting moments that we have seen from Joe Biden, not just in the debates, but in the entire general election. There is just obviously a massive gulf separating these two candidates on the issue of immigration. And where they start is the issue of family separation at the border and the more than 500 kids who are separated from their parents, and the government has still not been able to locate the parents. Right. This was something that most of the country recoiled from just horribly when this happened, and it's something that the president really had no capacity to defend in the debate. So what he did was...
Let me ask you a follow-up question.
They did it. We changed the policy.
Your response to that?
They did it. We changed.
Did not.
They built the cages.
Attack the Obama administration's record of...
Test.
Border enforcement, which was at the time a whole lot more a hard line than a lot of Democrats certainly wanted then, and certainly more hard line than would be acceptable in the party today. And that's when we hear Biden do something that he has almost never done as a presidential candidate.
The Obama administration did fail to deliver immigration reform, which had been a key promise during the administration. It also presided over record deportations as well as family detentions at the border before changing course. So why should voters trust you with an immigration overhaul now?
Because they made a mistake.
And that's
took too
to
long.
separate himself from Barack Obama. And he does it in a relatively subtle way, but he says, look, the administration made a mistake. And he says,
I'll be president of the United States, not vice president of the United States. And the fact
I'll be
is,
the
I've been
president
very
of the
clear
United States, not vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Which sure seems to suggest that he thinks that he would have handled things differently if he had had the top job during those 8 years when he was the vice president. And certainly that he would not approach the presidency in this one respect the same way Barack Obama did. And he promises that he will, in his first 100 days, send legislation to the Hill that proposes a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of that? Because he's not in a Democratic primary. He doesn't need to prove just how liberal he is on the question of immigration. He's running against Donald Trump, who's quite hard line on immigration. So why do you think Joe Biden chose to do that 12 days before the election?
I think it's clearly an acknowledgement that the politics of immigration have changed enormously in the last decade, that his own coalition, which depends heavily on Latino voters and other immigrant groups in key states across the country, would not tolerate the kind of mass deportation that went on during the Obama years, and that the country as a whole is more sympathetic to relatively lenient or progressive immigration policies because of the backlash against the way President Trump has done things.
We'll be right back.
Even if your team isn't in the same place, your work can be. You just need Asana. Asana is where teams coordinate work so they know what to do, why it matters, and how to get it done. Plus, everyone can see the team's plans, check progress, and discuss things. So you can get work done, and your team stays a team. Where there's Asana, there's a way. Visit asana.com/thedaily to try for free. That's Asana, ASANA.
All right, let's talk about our next section, which is race in America. And I want to talk about the way—
Alex, in the second half of the debate, the subject of race is explored in considerable depth, and it ends up feeling like a pretty revealing discussion.
I think it was. You know, we start out with this question from Kristen Welker asking the two candidates to speak directly to the country, directly to people of color about what they see in the country's crisis of racism and policing.
Mr. Vice President, in the next 2 minutes, I want you to speak directly to these families. Do you understand why these parents fear for their children?
And
I do.
we hear from Joe Biden a pretty direct answer to the question.
I never had to tell my daughter, if she's pulled over, make sure she puts, for a traffic stop, put both hands on top of the wheel and don't reach for the glove box because someone may shoot you.
Conversation moves to President Trump, and he delivers the kind of blustery answers that we have heard from him in the past.
I am the least racist person. I can't even see the audience because it's so dark, but I don't care who's in the audience. I'm the least racist person in this room.
Describes himself as the president who's done more for black people in this country than any other president.
With the exception of Abraham Lincoln, possible exception, but the exception of Abraham Lincoln, nobody has done what I've done.
And when Welker pushes him to address his criticism of the Black Lives Matter movement, the president basically reduces it to one scene that he claims to have encountered where protesters sort of left a bad impression on him because they were chanting anti-police slogans.
They were chanting pigs in a blanket, talking about police. Pigs, talking about our police. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. I said, that's a horrible thing. And
rather than trying to match Biden's empathy, he tries to attack Biden's record, and there is a bunch for him to work with when it comes to criminal justice. And he really takes Biden to task for the 1994 crime bill.
When he did such harm to the black community.
This is a bill that imposed, among other things, strict penalties for a whole range of offenses, expanded the federal death penalty, and what critics of the bill say led to an era of mass incarceration. And the president really pushed Biden to account for that record.
Now, you have done nothing other than the crime bill, which put
Oh, God.
tens of thousands of black men mostly in jail.
All right, let me-
And you know
let me
what?
a- let me
they
ask
remember
Vice
it because
President
if you
Biden
look
a
at what's
question.
happening with the voting right now,
Let me ask
they
Vice
remember
President
that
Biden
you treated them
about-
very, very badly.
The-
Just
the-
take a look at what's happening out there.
Vice President Biden, let me give you a chance to respond.
We only hear Biden wrestle with this aspect of his record up to a point. We know that there are aspects of the crime bill that he remains very proud of, but he shifts focus away from those. He doesn't offer a wholesale defense of the crime bill to talking about how the gaps in federal sentencing between different kinds of narcotics that clearly discriminate against people of color and black people in particular, that was a mistake for Congress to have done that. But he's kind of deflecting the core issue of the
We're not
crime
in the
bill.
crime bill.
But why didn't he get it done? See, it's all talk, no action with these politicians. Why didn't he get it done? That's what I'm going to do when I become president. You were vice president along with Obama as your president, your leader, for 8 years. Why didn't you get it done? You had 8 years to get it done. Now you're saying you're going to get it done because you're all talk and no action, Jim.
We got a lot of it done.
And this is a point in the debate where we see the president wield, to some effect, the argument that, if Joe Biden saw all these problems, he should have dealt with them at some point in his long career in Washington. Where the president gives Biden something of an opening to get out of that trap is when he says,
Why didn't you do it in the 8 years, a short time ago? Why didn't you do it? You just said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this.
and Biden's answer is,
We had a Republican Congress. That's the answer.
Well, you
Okay.
got to talk him into it, Joe. Sometimes
All right.
you got to talk him into it.
this is clearly a detour that he doesn't want to spend a whole lot much more time on.
Well, to that point, what do you make of these back and forths and the persistence of Donald Trump's case that Joe Biden didn't do enough when it came to criminal justice reform and race, given that Joe Biden is polling so far above the president on the issue of how he would handle race relations?
I think that there are the germs there of an argument that might be effective against Joe Biden if the president were seen as more credible on these issues himself. That if the country broadly saw Donald Trump as somebody who was interested in racial equality or criminal justice reform or addressing police brutality, then the notion that those were not priorities for Joe Biden for long phases of his career, would be, I think, a pretty fair criticism. But when you go directly from saying, essentially, I don't care for Black Lives Matter because I saw this one protest where they were calling police officers pigs, to saying, Mr. Biden, if you see all this as problematic, why didn't you do something about it? It's a little head spinning. It just doesn't quite gel in the same way when it's snapping back and forth like that.
Gentlemen,
did
we're
what we've
running out of
already done.
time, so we got to get on to climate change, please.
So next, the conversation turns to the environment and to clean energy. And Alex, I was sort of surprised a bit by how much time Biden spent focused on clean energy and, by implication, suggesting there's a problem with traditional sources of energy.
Climate change and climate warming, global warming, is an existential threat to humanity.
I think this is a real signal from Biden of his governing priorities and a sense from him and other Democrats, and certainly a hope that the politics of energy and climate are really now on their side, and that they feel like it can be a big part of an economic recovery package because they do see it as a pathway to creating jobs.
We're going to invest in, for example, 50,000 charging stations on our highways so that we can own the electric car market of the future. In the meantime, China is doing that. We're going to be in a position where we're going to see to it that we're going to take 4 million existing buildings and 2 million existing homes and retrofit them so they don't leak as much energy, saving hundreds of millions of barrels of oil in the process and creating significant number of jobs. And by the way,
it is also, at least in the short term, an opening for the president to appeal to segments of his own base and perhaps to some folks in the political middle who are still wary of the idea of turning the page on fossil fuels.
Would he
Question.
close
It
down
falls-
the oil
it
industry?
falls-
Would you close
it
down the
falls-
oil
By the way, I
industry?
would transition from the oil industry, yes. I
Oh,
will
that's a big
transition.
statement.
It is a big statement.
Then you heard the president literally start listing off states with significant fossil fuel sectors.
That's the biggest statement.
Okay,
Because
we have
basically
one
what he's
final
saying
question,
is he is
Mr.
going to
President.
destroy the oil industry. Will you remember that, Texas? Will you
Okay.
remember that, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma?
Vice President Biden, let me give you 10 seconds to respond, and then I
Ohio.
have to get.
And
to the
you've
final
had,
question.
after the debate, the Biden campaign walk back or try to walk back some of what he said on oil, that no, he's not trying to shut down the oil industry. He's trying to take subsidies away from the oil industry, which is a pretty mainstream position. But yeah, in the debate, and I do think realistically in the big picture, if you're promising net zero emissions by 2050, you are talking about winding down the oil sector. So, the bet on the Democratic side, not just for Biden, but broadly in the party, is that there is a broad enough and intense enough recognition in the electorate of the gravity of climate change as a problem. And there's enough of a recognition of the economic benefits of a clean energy economy that more voters are going to reward you for embracing that version of the future than will punish you for turning away from fossil fuel.
He takes everything out of context, but the point is, look, we have to move toward a net zero emissions. The first place to do that by the year 2035 is in energy production, by 2050 totally.
All right. One
Is he gonna
final
get
question
China to
both
do
of
it?
you. No, we're finished with
Is
this.
he
We
going
have
to
to
get
move on
China
to
to
our
do it?
final question. We
No,
have to
I'm
move
going
on
to
to our final
rejoin Paris
question.
Accord and make China abide by what they agreed to.
All right.
This felt like the most progressive version of Joe Biden on the debate stage, at least in the general election. And he was pretty unapologetic in the way he talked about energy, immigration, race. Is that something perhaps you can only do when the polls show you're doing pretty well in Pennsylvania and even doing relatively well in Texas and in Ohio, if you're Joe Biden?
I think we're going to find out. Joe Biden has run a pretty low risk campaign as these things go. This is not a candidate who has sort of gone big on a lot of really controversial policy in the general election. So, I think he is taking these risks advisedly. And look, when you look at the coalition that he is piecing together, there's a risk if you don't speak to these issues in a more assertive way, that being too cautious on immigration, he badly needs Latino voters and especially young Latino voters to show up on election day. He needs young people generally. He needs sort of educated suburbanites who are really sensitive to the issue of the environment every election cycle to, not just reject President Trump, but embrace something that he is selling. And, the risk for a candidate like Joe Biden, who is essentially running to be a safe harbor as an alternative to President Trump for the largest cross-section of voters available to him, is that if you do try to be all things to all people, who ends up really invested in you? And I do think we heard him try in a couple important ways in that debate to correct for that possibility.
Gentlemen, and this first question does go to you, President Trump. Imagine this is your inauguration day. What will you say in your address to Americans who did not vote for you? You'll each have 1 minute, starting with you, Mr.
We have to make a country totally successful as it was prior to the plague coming in from China. Now we're
So, Alex, back to
rebuilding
the
it.
beginning of our conversation. By the end of this debate, what did you make of the president's decision to not be the candidate of that first debate? Was it in any way effective in attempting to reset a race in which he is the underdog, as you said? And did Joe Biden successfully make an affirmative case that justifies his lead and makes it about him, not about the weaknesses of the president in this moment?
The president's approach was clearly more constructive than what he did in the first debate. And I think you have an enormous sigh of relief from Republicans as we speak that he did not just totally light himself on fire again. But, where I think the president winds up after this debate is, yes, stylistically, he was more restrained and more conventional for much, though not all, of the debate, but that he was playing a pretty bad hand in a somewhat more disciplined way. And he was delivering a message that most voters up to this point have not been persuaded by in a more fluent way. There are probably people out there who are more willing to listen to his message in this debate, delivered in this way, than in that first debate when he was just all over the place. But that's a separate question from whether anybody who's not already supporting the president is going to like what they hear.
We are on the road to success, but I'm cutting taxes, and he wants to raise everybody's taxes, and he wants to put new regulations on everything. He will kill it. If he gets in, you will have a depression, the likes of which you've never seen. Your 401ks will go to hell, and it'll be a very, very sad day for this country.
All right. Vice President Biden, same question to you.
On the Biden side of this, look, I think he did manage to make more of a case for himself than he did in the first debate. He did not win this debate just by default. The sort of snap polls after the debate suggest that more people liked what he had to say than the president. And in that respect, he probably managed to keep the race, pretty much within the parameters that it was already in.
And I'm going to say, as I said at the beginning, what is on the ballot here is the character of this country: decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone...
I don't know that there was some big moment of breakthrough for Biden where we'll all look back on this debate and say, that was the moment that he put it away. But he did have some moments that I think probably do speak to the electorate in a valuable way. There were a couple exchanges around the coronavirus, around what he hopes to do in the way of economic support to distressed families and businesses, that if you are a voter who is sitting at home and just worried sick about what's going on right now, probably address your concerns in a more direct way than a lot of the stuff you heard from the president. And as much as I do think that Biden has needed to clear a certain bar in articulating what he will actually do for the country, the core political assumption of Joe Biden's campaign is the country wants a leader who looks and acts like a president, and he is that guy, and President Trump is not.
You haven't been getting it the last 4 years.
All right. I want to thank you both for a very robust hour and a half, a fantastic debate. Really appreciate it. President Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden. Election Day is November 3rd. Don't forget to vote. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Well, Alex, thank you very much. I'm going to miss these late nights.
Me too.
Wait, but at the beginning you said you wouldn't.
Well, I said I would miss the debates. That's the post game is the fun part.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
We'll be right back.
This is Nick. This is Jack. And this is Snacks Daily. It is Friday, October 23rd. Nick? Yep, it's the end of the week, and it happens to be the best one of the week. It is a TBOY. First story, Jack. What do we got over there? Quibi has announced it's shutting itself down in a Quibi or two. Already got the autopsy report, Jack. Do we have a prognosis, or is it a diagnosis? We're making a prognosis. I think it's a cause of death. There's going to be an OSIS involved. Second story, Jack. What's involved? Goldman Sachs' bad trip to Malaysia a bunch of years ago. Yep. Feels like it was The Hangover Part 4 for Goldman. They're stuck with a bill for $5 billion and huge implications for the entire financial industry. For our third and final story, you buy Bitcoin, bro? Your crypto buddy Steve, is probably named Steve, is calling you this week about the Main Street moment over at Bitcoin, courtesy of Venmo. This is Jack. My buddy Nick owns a Bitcoin. His name is Ben. He hasn't done much till recently. But Snackers, before we hit those three great stories, the biggest change to your refrigerator in the 21st century is about to happen. Get this. Jack and I noticed that Coca-Cola is shutting down 200 200 of its drink brands.
Sliced bread is nothing compared to the half of Coke-owned beverages that will disappear next year.
Jack, I don't know, we got to whiteboard this thing. What are we going to call this? We got to call it like the Great Clean Out.
The silent spill.
How about the Epic Evaporation?
Coca-Cola actually calls these brands that it's killing their zombie brands.
Yeah, that's their term, zombie brands, because the brands aren't growing. They're just lingering. They're hanging out on shelves. It's kind of creepy, to be honest.
Last month, we updated you that Coke executed a couple of zombie brands, Odwalla and Zico.
We're talking the OG brands of smoothies and coconut water. Sad to see these guys go, Jack.
We thought Odwalla and Zico is where the pain would end.
But we were so wrong. It is a bloodbath out there over in the hydration category. Dasani, Powerade, Vitamin Water. They're all getting silently spilled some of their latest variations.
Coca-Cola, for some reason, owns like 13 different Dasani brands, so they're going to get rid of a bunch of them.
Jack, would you like this Dasani now with extra water? But here's the crazy thing about these zombie brands, all 200 of them. They're just 2% of Coca-Cola's total beverage sales.
So you got to ask, why didn't this happen sooner?
Jack, I assume it's kind of tough to pick your favorite kids, but honestly, Coca-Cola is kind of choosing their favorite child right now.
The golden boy right now is Topo Chico Hard Seltzer and anything with the word hard in it.
Anything hard seltzer just got upped its allowance. And here are the car keys. Go have a fun weekend. Don't even bother calling mom and dad.
Coconut smoothie, on the other hand?
Nope. Go to your room. Never come out. We don't want to see you again. And can you do the hard seltzer's homework for them?
Give your sister your Game Boy. Your PS2 privileges are revoked.
Zombie brands are done. Let's hit our 3 stories.
You're tuned in to Snacks Daily. We spoke to the lawyers and we got to get something legal out the way. The snacks you're about to hear ain't food, it's ear candy. They don't reflect the views of the Robin Hood family. It's all informational, just so you know. We're not recommending any securities. Nope. It's not a research report or investment advice. Not an offer or sale of a security. Right. Snacks is digestible. Business news for you. Robin Hood Financial, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC.
For our first story, Quibi is sadly shutting down after just 6 months.
In about the length of a single Quibi episode, Quibi is now no more.
Quibi, short for quick bite, sounds like a flavor of gummy. Jack, break it down. What is the Quibi?
As a reminder to the snackers, they were offering HBO quality content chopped into quick bites for people with short attention spans.
We're talking mobile only, $5 or $8 a month. Jack's already using the past tense. He's already getting ahead of the game.
Now, they called it HBO quality content. We're thinking it was Hulu quality content at best.
Yep, but still was mobile only, and you were forbidden. Couldn't even ask. Don't even think about putting this on your TV.
And it was designed for in-between moments. Each episode was like 8 to 10 minutes.
You're on the subway commute, you're between 42nd and 59th Street, you're gonna pop in an episode, maybe you're waiting in line in the grocery store.
And the who of this story is the one that got all the attention because we're talking Jeffrey Katzenberg, the guy who invented the Shrek.
He was teaming up with Meg Whitman of HP quality fame. You can thank your printer for her.
She also was the first CEO of eBay, I think. And also, it's not the Shrek, it's just Shrek. My bad on that.
It could be the Shrek. It could be a verb at this point. But together, this pair raised $2 billion. $2 billion. A quarter of a lift before Quibi had even launched.
That's right. There was no Quibi in the App Store, and they already had $2 billion almost from investors.
So Quibi launches in April of this year, goes with the extremely absurdly generous 3-month free trial. No, please have another sample. And then we got the numbers.
Yeah, so Quibi's like bragging about 3.5 million subscribers, but they were free subscribers. It was in July that we saw who really wanted to stick with Quibi.
A data processing firm let us know that it turns out 90% of all those users from the first 3 months, they ended up quitting as soon as they had to pay for the first time.
Full disclosure, I'm one of those Quibi people who defected when I actually had to pay for it.
Jack, I gotta come clean here. I am also one of those defectors of July.
Nick, I watched one episode and it was okay. I just wasn't compelled to ever return to the app.
I hear you. The Jennifer Lopez giving away a lot of money. I got through 2 episodes. It was charming, but I didn't end up becoming a hardcore.
Seems though, Nick's and my experiences wasn't atypical. Because in September, we heard rumblings that Jeffrey Katzenberg was going to LA and like trying to sell the company.
Katzenberg pulled up in the Uber Black, went to Apple, went to Disney, went to Facebook, went to NBC, and all of them passed on buying Quibi's content last month.
Which brings us to last night. After Nick and I just finished the Snacks Daily recording that came out yesterday.
It was a great recording. That was a great one.
We see news that Quibi posted an open letter saying what's going on with their future.
The main note of this letter, Quibi is calling it quits.
They're not trying to merge anymore. They're not trying to sell to another company. They're going to shut down the app.
They are. They've got $350 million left, and very nobly, they're actually going to return that money to shareholders, which is a great move.
They're not going to like pull an Adam Newman and like host a company party on Hawaii for a month.
Vegas, Quibi team, ASAP.
In the letter announcing that they're shutting down, Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman gave two big reasons for the failure of Quibi.
The first issue was timing, and the second issue was the idea itself.
All right, let's address case number one, timing. And look, it launched on April 6th, 2020, mid-early pandemic.
Yeah, you're not on that 4 train going from 42nd to 59th Street, and you're not having the in-between moments where you're waiting for a friend at the restaurant, probably Timmy, running late.
People were sitting at home streaming, and the usage on mobile video apps peaked to a record high during the pandemic. It just wasn't Quibi.
Yeah, there was actually more consumption and demand for content than there's probably ever been in history.
All right, now another timing issue with Quibi. They had lots of competition. They jumped into the market just as Apple TV Plus, Peacock, and HBO Max were launching too.
But as Jack and I have mentioned in a takeaway on Quibi many moons ago, the real competition for them wasn't other streaming apps, it was social media apps.
Snapchat just had one of their best quarters ever during the pandemic. You don't hear them complaining about timing.
No, and TikTok wasn't really a thing last year, kind of a thing this year, even though you're at home.
Once again, we think the real competition for Quibi was social media apps, which are doing really well.
But as for Meg and Jeff's second point about the idea not being strong enough, feels like we should address that one with, Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over at Quibi?
Quibi's idea did make sense. Its execution didn't make sense.
Snackers, content is still king, and Meg Whitman and Jeff Katzenberg did market it as HBO quality content, which it kind of wasn't.
Exhibit A, the show about a lady obsessed with a golden arm. Did you hear your buddies saying you got to watch that on Quibi next?
Checked it out. It's got the lady from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, who's fantastic in kind of a B-weight role for her, where she has a golden arm that she's obsessed with.
The show didn't catch on, and it actually turns out, according to reports, many of the shows that made it to Quibi, they were leftovers that Netflix and HBO had passed on.
But the other key that Jack and I have noticed is that Quibi was so focused on mobile only that it actually became an anti-social app.
Screenshotting of the Quibi app was banned.
No.
There were no social buttons to share with your friends.
You can't do it.
And even when you were sitting at home for the whole month of April, you weren't allowed to cast what was on your phone to your huge TV that was sitting right in front of you.
Oh, and by the way, if you open the app, there were no memes, no trending hashtags, and no TikTok-style discovery to find out what other shows you should watch.
The last sentence of Quibi's obituary on Snacks Daily. Quality mobile-first streaming video was an idea that made sense.
Those mistakes, they didn't. For our second story, Goldman Sachs just admitted to bribery in a huge scandal in Malaysia.
And unlike in the 2008 financial crisis, the individuals responsible are being punished too.
We got to travel back to the early 2010s. Jack and I were working in the banking industry in Manhattan at banks, wearing ties, having to shave every day out of peer pressure.
Little did we know, over in Malaysia, the government was asking big-time investors for money to fund economic development projects.
Yeah, so Goldman Sachs came to the rescue here with, just a casual, classic investment banking service.
A whole bunch of analysts were working until 4 a.m. and they said, hey, Malaysia, we can structure for you a $6.5 billion bond issuance.
Now, those analysts have probably grown up into associates now, and if you are one of them, we'd love to know what the go-to seamless meal at 3 a.m. was when you ordered it.
Basically, Goldman says, we will convince huge money managers to buy your bonds for $6.5 billion because you're going to pay them back with interest, Malaysia. Like, that's how we're going to convince them.
Yeah, that's how this is going to work. Now, Jack and I don't know the exact fee that Goldman charged, but based on our experience, we're going to estimate it was like probably a 1% kind of fee.
Yeah, and a 1% fee sounds small, but a 1% fee on a $6.5 billion amount, that's a $65 million gift for Goldman Sachs.
Ding, ding, ding. Very nice when bonus season comes around, except one problem that arose a few years later.
That fund wasn't interested in economic development at all.
Not building parks over in Kuala Lumpur anytime soon.
Turns out the Malaysian officials, one in particular, who's still an international fugitive, by the way.
Maybe a snacker? We don't know. Could be listening somewhere else.
He pocketed a whole bunch of that money that was supposed to help build the country.
Turned out this was a huge fraud scheme, and wealthy Malaysians frustratingly embezzled a whole lot of funds.
Now, since those Goldman analysts had whipped up the whole deal on a whiteboard,
Yep.
A bunch of government lawyers got to work and were like, hey, Goldman, what did you know about this fraud scheme?
And so since 2018, 10 law enforcement agencies have pressed charges against Goldman Sachs for all this.
The United States, the UK, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia. This is the Olympics of lawsuits.
And now presenting the legal team of Japan
To issue the final closing affidavit.
Yesterday, this all came to a raveling conclusion when Goldman Sachs admitted to guilt of anti-bribery laws.
Translation here, the 65 million or so in fees it pocketed, those were basically bribes from the Malaysian officials for arranging the scheme and to stay quiet.
So Goldman just announced that it will pay up $5.3 billion in fines, wiping away a whopping 8 months. Get this, 8 months of Goldman Sachs' profits.
Goldman announced yesterday it's paying half a lift in fines for something it did in Malaysia like 5 or 6 years ago.
5.5, kind of a big number, $5.5 billion. You're wondering how the stock did. This is bad, but investors were completely ready for the pain, apparently.
Public companies like Goldman Sachs and any other company with a stock that's tradable, they must inform investors as early as they can about big things that could affect the stock price.
Well, interestingly, we noticed that Goldman told us back in August to expect a roughly $5 billion price tag to resolve this scandal.
And yesterday we learned it was 5.3 billion, pretty close.
So the stock ended up rising a bit yesterday because the fine was already baked in. It's like you go in for your flu shot and they don't say, don't worry, this will kind of hurt. They say, this is really gonna hurt.
You were ready for the pain. You were already crying.
Nothing better than a pre-cry. So Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over at Goldman?
We've reached a new era in financial crime.
Yes, we have.
Individual wrongdoers are finally being held responsible.
Snackers, big bank, does bad thing, pays huge fine. You've heard it a dozen times. You've seen it on a dozen newspapers.
But here's where this story with Goldman Sachs gets interesting. Individual Goldman employees, they're getting in trouble too.
Jack and I have literally never heard of this before. The bad guys, they tend to just get away in these situations.
But the two key Goldman deal makers who structured this deal, one has already pled guilty to money laundering and bribery, and the other is being charged for money laundering and bribery with a trial coming soon.
They're even telling the ex-CEO of Goldman, you're going to have to come back to 200 West Street, and we're going to need you to sign a few papers and bring a check.
Yeah, pretty much the top 5 positions at Goldman, the current CEO, CFO, COO, all that, and the former CEO, CFO, all that. They're all paying back bonuses.
So the 2008 financial crisis and its handling, it's taught us a few lessons.
Without personal liability, unethical behavior at companies probably won't stop.
And if a dirty deal makes executives money, they could lose it years later.
Good to see those lessons be put into place here.
For our third and final story, PayPal is going to start letting users buy and sell, and get this, pay in cryptocurrencies on Venmo.
Separate but definitely related story. Bitcoin's having its biggest week of 2020.
Jack, brings us back to like a few years ago. Remember you'd be like walking around the office and getting completely unsolicited advice from everybody on buying Bitcoin?
Late 2017, it was insane. My brother's like, Jack, a guy at work made $10,000 on Bitcoin in a week. Should I buy, Jack? And I'm like,
you'd hear a noise on like 18th Street and it was someone who was like, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, I bought 6 of them.
Yeah, Bitcoin was insane back then, and it feels kind of like 2017 crypto land all over again.
Yeah, first funny thing, Jack, and I noticed this week, the Bahamas just launched its first ever national digital currency. Good for them.
It's actually been called the Bahamian Sand Dollar.
Great name. Sounds like a good Halloween costume, by the way. But yesterday, the other big thing we noticed, Bitcoin just passed $13,000 for the first time in 3 years.
What's driving the news, we think, is that PayPal will let users buy, sell, hold, and pay in cryptocurrency soon.
Even though Bitcoin hasn't really done much in the last year, this is a mainstream moment, we're thinking, for Bitcoin, because 350 million PayPal users worldwide are actively using PayPal.
The population of the United States is soon going to have access to crypto super easy because of PayPal.
So snackers, here's how this goes down. You can go to like paypal.com right now and join a wait list, and pretty soon, they said, before the end of the year, you'll be able to access this service.
Tacos at Tacombe and Nolita? Pay with Bitcoin.
You're doing a shopping binge over at Bloomingdale's, you could end up paying with Bitcoin.
You're up in Seattle and it starts raining and got no raincoat? Pay for your raincoat at REI with Bitcoin.
By next year, they're going to have 26 million stores you'll be able to pay for Bitcoin at.
So with any Bitcoin paying situation, you got to talk about the logistics.
I know what you're thinking, Jack, because it's never as pretty as it sounds.
So if I got Bitcoin and I'm soaked and I need that raincoat, I can pay REI my Bitcoin, but REI is going to get dollars because PayPal is going to handle the conversion. from Bitcoin to dollar.
Jack, I think you're going to look fantastic in that raincoat. Second of all, I want to point out it's going to cost you a little bit more than just that final price.
PayPal isn't UNICEF, so they're going to charge for this. In fact, for any transaction under $100 worth of Bitcoin, you'll pay a 2.3% fee.
Just like with everything with Bitcoin, it's a little bit more complicated once you get into the actual Bitcoin.
But the calendar day everyone circled is when Bitcoin is coming to Venmo in early 2021.
That's the real mainstream moment, because then you can have brunch with Becky, send her 1/1000th of Bitcoin for that shakshuka, or as my friend Jack likes to call it, Middle Eastern huevos rancheros.
I'm a big fan. I'd never seen it until Nick ordered it in New York City that one day.
It's a wonderful thing, although you burn yourself. Inevitably, you burn yourself. So, Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over at PayPal and Bitcoin?
Crypto needs a chaperone, a trustworthy person who can get everyone to chill out a little bit.
Right now, Snackers, Bitcoin has basically just been a speculative investment.
It is mostly bought by investors, hoping that it jumps in value so that they can sell it for a return.
But it could also completely fall, and a lot of people have been really badly burned on cryptocurrencies.
Crypto is big on the crypto right now.
Yes.
Not so much on the currency part of cryptocurrency.
Perfectly put, Jack, because Bitcoin hasn't become a true currency for paying for things, basically because of three barriers.
The three barriers are trust, acceptance, and volatility.
But PayPal is the biggest name yet who could fix two, maybe even three of those key things.
First, the trust.
What's up guys, Damien Keys here, welcome back to the channel. Every day I work with musicians on releasing music. After all, that's my gig. I am the music industry guy. I help musicians with their growth, I help musicians with their release strategy and how to build their career. So every single day I get hundreds of questions, whether it's in my DMs on Instagram, on Facebook, whether it's in the YouTube comments, especially around releasing music. And obviously, as I have DK Music Business Academy, I'm working closely with musicians on their releases. And there are certain problems that crop up, certain big mistakes that get done time and time again. So I thought I would go through the biggest ones so you guys don't have to get those problems. You can avoid them.
Nice.
Number one, and probably the thing I see the most regularly, is not leaving enough time for uploading to Spotify. And I get it, you want to release music, you want to get it out there, you want to start promoting it. All we've got to do is just get that mix and get that master finalized and then we're off. But it's not quite as simple as that, because that mix, that master, sometimes they take a bit longer. Then when it comes to uploading, you've got to upload it through your aggregator to all of the different platforms. And it's kind of like dominoes. Once you've actually got the dominoes set up, it might only take a few seconds to actually knock them all down again, but it takes hours and hours of setup to get to that point. And also, things do and probably will go wrong, so we have to factor that in. What happens if your music gets uploaded to the wrong profile? Or what happens if your artwork doesn't fit quite right? And at that point, you're starting to panic because the time is running out. And we've also got to start promoting it and telling everyone. Or you might have already started telling everybody. So you've got your date. This is where you have to leave enough time. You have to leave several weeks. I would recommend 3 to 4 weeks to make sure you've got enough time where you've got the physical track, and that's where you can start to upload it, allowing for things to go wrong so you can start to work on your strategy to promote this, getting people to hear it without the panic, without that worry. Number 2, releasing a cover song without the correct license. You wouldn't believe how many messages I get from people who either have questions about this or who have problems because they've had some kind of copyright claim or copyright strike. And it's because they don't have the correct license, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. Because if you don't have it and you aren't compensating the person who owns the copyright, then therefore you could potentially get a copyright claim, or worse, a copyright strike. And you could even get your entire channel taken down. So this is big, big problems. But we are living in a world where copyright for covers isn't thought of as a big deal because covers are all around us. So if you are releasing a cover, you need to compensate the person who owns it. It's as simple as that. That is copyright law. The way you do that is nice and simple. Go and check out Easy Song Licensing, go and check out Louder, go and check out Harry Fox Agency. For probably $15, you can get all of the license in place to make sure that you are allowed to release and sell that cover. Number 3, pointing everything in the direction of that release. You've put so much time and effort and energy into getting that song out there. Now you need everyone to know about it. So point everything. You have to create the signpost. So your banners on every social media platform should say the new single out now. The links, your bio, your email link, your highlights in your Instagram, anything that you can do to point people in the direction to say, this is the thing. On your Spotify, your artist pick, that should be your new single. You are not leaving anything to chance. You are saying, this is the thing I need you to know about, so therefore it is in every link, it is in every description, it is every conversation that you have, pointing people just like a sign saying, the single is here. Number 4, not doing a music video with your song. We are living in a visual world, and not only that, but music for many, many, many years has had to be attached to something. And yes, you can take your music and you can put it on Spotify and you can promote it straight across. But if you're gonna start visually promoting something, which means if you're gonna do boosts or ads or try and get people's attention, it needs to have something visual to be attached to. So doing some kind of music video in 2020, I see it as an absolute imperative thing to do, because otherwise Pushing it is very difficult. You are in a world where you need to grab people's attention. The way you do that is visually first and then the audio once you've got their attention. So if you're not doing a music video, you are missing out a huge opportunity. And I understand an expensive music video might not be something you can afford, but otherwise, tough. You're gonna have to do something else. You're gonna have to be clever with it. You're gonna have to be creative, but you do need to have that music video. And number 5, slightly similar to the last point, thinking that the world revolves around Spotify numbers. You would not believe how many people come to me and they go, oh, I got this massive playlist and I just got 100,000 spins on Spotify. Oh, brilliant, that's fantastic. What do I do next? Well, you have to go again because nobody knows who you are. They like the song. They might have added the song to a playlist. Some of them, but probably very few, will have come through to your Instagram, but that's what we've got to do. Our job is to build the party. The party isn't on Spotify. The party is where you want it to be on Instagram or YouTube, probably Instagram in today's consumption habits. That's where people are going to come in and they're going to follow you. That's where you can market to them. That's where you can provide value. That's where you can have conversations. But it isn't Spotify, because pushing people across to Spotify and expecting them to come back to Instagram, you'll be very disappointed. So let's bring people into the party. Let's make sure they have an amazing time. And whilst they're having an amazing time, that's the bit where we say, by the way, you know you have an amazing time. Well, the new single is out on Spotify. Then they will go to Spotify, but more importantly, they will come back again. And number 6, and lastly, is budgeting, or more importantly, not budgeting. Your cash flow is so crucial, and it's so crucial for when you go into your release. Because otherwise, what tends to happen is you're constantly grabbing your credit card every 5 minutes going, oh, that's something I need to do, I'll pay for that. And everything starts to mount up. And all of a sudden, it's very easy to start being halfway through this release, or at the end of the release, and adding up how much money you've spent and just thinking, not only have I spent far too much money, which I shouldn't have spent, but also that money could have been much, much better spent if I put it towards one thing rather than a million tiny details. The way you do this is a cash flow, it's a budget forecast. It makes sure you know exactly what you're going to spend and when you're going to spend it. And you can put some miscellaneous in there, but it means you are in control of your finances, but more importantly, you are in control of the entire release strategy and how much you're going to spend. Now, if you don't know about cash flows, it's very, very simple. There's one in DK Music Business Academy, and there's a budget forecaster, but you can find them elsewhere. You need to get one. You need to be in control of your finances. So, guys, forecast. It makes sure, by the way, you know you have an amazing time. Well, the new single is out on Spotify. Then they will go to Spotify, but more importantly, they will come back again. And number 6, and lastly, is budgeting, or more importantly, not budgeting. Your cash flow is so crucial, and it's so crucial for when you go into your release. Because otherwise, what tends to happen is you're constantly grabbing your credit card every 5 minutes going, oh, that's something I need to do, I'll pay for that. And everything starts to mount up. And all of a sudden, it's very easy to start being halfway through this release, or at the end of the release, and adding up how much money you've spent and just thinking, not only have I spent far too much money, which I shouldn't have spent, but also that money could have been much, much better spent if I put it towards one thing rather than a million tiny details. The way you do this is a cash flow, it's a budget forecast. It makes sure you know exactly what you're going to spend and when you're going to spend it. And you can put some miscellaneous in there, but it means you are in control of your finances, but more importantly, you are in control of the entire release strategy and how much you're going to spend. Now, if you don't know about cash flows, it's very, very simple. There's one in DK Music Business Academy, and there's a budget forecaster, but you can find them elsewhere. You need to get one. You need to be in control of your finances. So guys, these things might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised. They crop up every single day with artists all around the world. And your job is to cut through the noise. Your job is to build that audience. Your job is to make sure people know about you and your music and can build with you. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you can do me a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. More importantly, come and be a part of this community, because at this moment in time, it's pretty tough navigating, releasing music and growing your audience. If only there was a magic button to get my song on a huge playlist in front of thousands of legitimate people. I'd pay for that. What's up guys, Damien Keys here, welcome back to the channel. So, more and more adverts are popping up in my Instagram feed and my Instagram story from legitimate companies telling me that they can get my music in front of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of real people and real fans in order to build an audience just for the sake of a couple of dollars. And I get it. This is human nature. This is where we, the artists, want to get our music in front of as many people as possible. And we want to do this as quickly and easily and cheaply as possible. But is this the answer? Well, whilst this debate has been rumbling on for a while, you might not realize that this debate has been rumbling on slightly longer than you may think, because it does actually go back to the 1950s. There was the 1960s payola scandal, which was all about radio, which started in the 1950s. Did you know in 1950 there were 250 DJs in the US, but by 1957 there were 5,000 radio DJs. As music industry, music labels popped up from everywhere, which meant recorded music took over from live music, which meant radio had this massive surge, and everything started to boom, and the music industry as we know it really started to take off. And everyone knew that they needed to get their music in front of people. But back then, the way you did that was radio. And if there was a popular radio DJ and a popular radio show, then if you got your music on that radio show, then this meant that that was huge for your music and your career. And so record labels went to town. They went to work on these DJs and on these radio stations. In fact, they made any way that they could in order to get their music into that station, onto that radio DJ's playlist, which meant bribery, it meant money, it meant taking them out to lavish parties, it meant plowing them with alcohol, it meant any way necessary to make sure that their music got onto that radio station. This is nothing new. The problem back then is the same as what we have now. This was against terms of service. And why? Because back then, radio waves were owned by America, by American government, and therefore the American government prohibited these through laws so that you couldn't pay to put your music in front of people, because that is an advert, and radio wasn't about advertising, it was about playing music that the people wanted and not duping them into music that they think that they wanted, all for the sake of a backhander. Now fast forward to today, and now it's the same thing. We can now pay to get our music in front of people in multiple different ways. One of those ways is paying curators to put your music on their playlist. They've made a playlist, they've built a following, and they're saying to you, if you want to be a part of this, then you can, but it is going to cost you money. But there are several different ways of doing this, because some of them are illegal and against terms of service when it comes to Spotify. Some of them are a bit of a grey area and they slide by, whilst others are completely acceptable. So the first way is you go and find a curator, you have a chat with them, you build a relationship with them, you send them your music and you see if they like it. Completely legal, completely fine. That is not against terms of service. You are saying you might like this, they say I do like this, it goes into their playlist, everyone's a winner. But then you've got the pay to play, which is where you are paying the curator to be put directly into their playlist. Spotify says, no, 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 this is against the terms of service. You are not allowed to do this. But that doesn't stop these people advertising all across social media, flaunting their disrespect for these terms and services and saying, yeah, I know, but what are you going to do about it? Give me some money and we will make you famous. But then you get the halfway house. Then you get Submit Hub or Playlist Push or Spotify. See what they did with the name there? It's quite clever. It's like Spotify, but also Spotify. Okay, I thought it was quite good. Now with these companies, you're not paying to put your music on a playlist, you are paying for someone to listen to your music and give you some feedback on it. So therefore it's kind of a little bit like mentorship, where they say, I will tell you what I think of your music, and if I then happen to like it, I will then put that onto my playlist. So therefore, if it does go on my playlist, I have not done anything wrong when it comes to terms of service. So let's talk about a few of these. Number one, let's talk about if you can buy straight onto someone's playlist, you've already got a huge problem. And let me tell you why. Because way back in the day, I was a radio DJ. And when I started as a radio DJ, I wanted to promote loads of up and coming bands, which meant loads of unsigned acts. Loads of unsigned artists would send me their demos every single day. And I really took pride in that. And over a couple of years, we built up a radio show which was all about promoting new music. And every single radio DJ that I knew, and every wannabe radio DJ or aspiring DJ who wanted to go on to bigger and better things, we took it seriously. What we did was we loved the art, we loved the music, we loved trying to build up artists. And this idea that someone could just come along and just say, I'll give you some money, just play this, knowing that we might not like it, that just wouldn't fly. That wouldn't be a thing. And it's the same thing when it comes to curators. It's the same thing when it comes to bloggers. You have to believe. And the reason why you have to believe isn't just for your own sake, but also for your audience. Every time I release a YouTube video, I am trying to think of the best thing, the most value that I can bring to you. And every single day, I will get between 5 to 10 emails from people saying they will pay me money if I will mention their product on my YouTube. Now that sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds fantastic. But if you saw most of the crap that I get sent that I'm expected to show you guys, then that's disrespectful for you. Because whilst I'm not into sharing some back scratcher for the sake of 50 quid, it's more importantly that it's disrespectful to you, the viewer, which means that you will leave, you won't get value, you'll get pissed off, and all of a sudden it will kill my channel. So if you see an advert saying that you can buy straight on to a blog or a vlog or a curated playlist, you need to be wary, because probably what's happening is they're thinking of the money and they're not thinking of you or the art, or more importantly, their listeners. And that is a huge, huge no-no, because if it means they're taking the money and they're putting you onto any old playlist, or they're putting you onto a playlist with fake listeners, then you've got huge problems. Because I get questions so often of how you change your fans also like, which is a section on your Spotify. And the answer is, it's not that easy. So if you paid for a bunch of listens and now your fans also like are a mixture of Iranian rave music and boy band karaoke, then you brought that upon yourself. Now, when it comes to something like Playlist Push or especially Submit Hub, this is slightly different, because now you're building relationships. And one thing you notice with Submit Hub is you're talking to real people, you're getting feedback, and if they like you, there's more chance of them putting a second or a third or a fourth track. There's a chance that they're going to come along for the ride and for the journey of your career. Now, this is different. This is hard work, this is hustle, this is where you are putting the work into your music and building relationships, and some of those relationships might be bloggers, they might be curated playlisters, they might be people from labels, they might also be vloggers, they might be podcasters, but you are putting the groundwork into people who have influence instead of just paying them money and automatically expecting them to do what you want. Now, the problem with something like Submit Hub is you might submit to 50 or 100 playlists and they might all say no, which means not only are you out of pocket, but you've got onto no playlists. And I understand that's when people are desperate and they just think, but I can just pay to get straight into a playlist. The problem is what comes with that is very, very little. You see, back in the 1950s, there was only one way. There was a gatekeeper. There was a route which you need to get signed to a label to afford a studio, but the label needed to be able to afford to get you on radio. Nowadays, it's very, very different. There's so many ways that you can get your music in front of people that you couldn't do back then. And now it's much, much cheaper. For example, if I want to get in front of 100,000 people who all like a certain niche, I can do that for $100. $100 to get in front of what is a Wembley Stadium size crowd. That is insane. With a bit of Facebook ads knowledge, you can now get in front of people. The issue isn't about getting in front of people. And this is the bit that people need to realize. The issue is what happens when you get in front of people. The question is, what makes you interesting? What makes me stop what I'm doing to want to learn more about you? Because we are now surrounded by 5,000 to 10,000 messages and adverts every single day. So what makes you stand out? It can't just be, I wrote a good song. Good is not good enough. And there is a golden rule when it comes to all of this playlist stuff, which I think people have the wrong way around. People have this idea that if I get onto a playlist, then I will build a fan base. And it's wrong. It's not actually the truth. It's flipped. It's the other way around. If you build the fan base, you will get onto playlists. If you think of it that way around, then your career will go from strength to strength. It's the same argument for musicians when they come to me and say, hey, if you give me the work, I'll get a car. And I say, no, you get a car and I can get you the work. But without a car, it's going to be very difficult. Same thing with this. If you build the fans, you can get on the playlists. But without the fans, it's difficult to get onto the playlists. And if you think that just getting onto a playlist will bring in fans, you got another thing coming. Because if you think that 50,000 people are going to hear a track, go and find you, subscribe to your Instagram when you're not playing the full game, making your Instagram interesting, doing interesting things, making more than just one song, having something that you stand for, all of these things play a part in the game. Playlists are a small part of the game, but they don't come first. They come way down the line whilst you're building momentum and people think, the reason why I'll put this into my playlist is because I know it will bring people into my playlist. It'll get people to stay on my playlist, not because I'll get an extra $5. So I know that when it comes to seeing these adverts from companies that say they're legit, promising you that you're going to get 500 new fans in the next couple of days, please, I know it feels like an amazing opportunity, but if it's too good to be true, or it feels too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Now is the time for us to build a fan base, an army, one by one. Now is not the time to try and take every shortcut with a couple of extra bucks, even though it feels so appealing. Now is the time to focus on the one-to-one. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you can do me a favor, if you can hit that like and that subscribe button, because it makes a massive difference to this algorithm. And if you are serious about your music career and you want to work more closely with me and a bunch of other amazing like-minded musicians, then don't forget, DK Music Business Academy is in the link below. That has a chance that we can work together on a kind of more day-to-day basis. So stay safe, don't fall for those scammers, and I'll see you guys soon. Getting your music on a Spotify playlist couldn't be easier. Let me demonstrate. Firstly, you go and find your song on Spotify. Then after that, you drag your track down to your playlist or new playlist, and boom, you've done it. You've made your playlist. Couldn't be easier. In fact, I don't really think we actually needed to have this video because it was pretty much common sense. What shall I do for the next 10 minutes for the YouTube algorithm? What's up guys, Damien Keys here. Okay, I know that wasn't what you meant when you said getting onto Spotify playlists. So today I'm going to take you through everything I know and everything I've researched about getting yourself onto Spotify playlists. But first, let me ask you a question. Would you mind liking and subscribing to this video where we're doing this every single day? No, in all seriousness, let me ask you a question. How seriously, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very and 10 being ooh very, how seriously do you take your Spotify? How seriously do you take the energy and effort that you put into Spotify, let's say if it was actually a social media platform? Now, while Spotify isn't social media, it is run by algorithms, so it's about as close as you can get to social media without the interaction. Now, in this video, I do want to go into Spotify curated playlists and individual playlists. But before we do any of that, we need to get back to basics. We need to sort out your Spotify, because if we don't sort out your Spotify, you are not going to stand a chance in getting into people's playlists. Now, Spotify is very similar to YouTube. It works off an algorithm. It has one job, and that is to provide you with music to try and get you to stay on Spotify for as long as possible. In fact, if Spotify could keep you on Spotify for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it would be a very, very happy bunny. So your job is to play the algorithm. Your job is to keep people on Spotify. The more you do that, the more Spotify will reward you. And the less you do that, the more Spotify will ignore you. So putting your track onto Spotify and then emailing a curator of a Spotify playlist and saying, can you put my song on your playlist? That is not going to fly. So come with me on a journey. Okay, so we're on Spotify. We can see that I've been searching for some playlists, which we will get to in a minute, but I want to work on a band that sent me some music this week, and that band is called Pistol Whip. Now, Pistol Whip, as soon as they sent me the music, I loved it. It is fat riff rock. Check this out. So as soon as I heard this, I was like, I'm in. Amazing. Okay, brilliant. Guys, love the track. In fact, love both the tracks. This band, I'm all in. I want to know more. But then when I go to the Spotify, I'm like, how are you going to get on playlists? Because at the moment, the Spotify has zero love. And what we're going to do over the next couple of days is we are going to pour in the love into Spotify like we would on any other platform. So the first thing I would do is sign up to Spotify for Artists. Spotify for Artists is an app that allows you to connect with your fans, but also it has all of the back end stuff, all of the stats that really, really help. But also it verifies you, so you even get a little blue tick. So Spotify for Artists helps you target who are your fan base, where are your fan base? So for example, should you want to put a tour together, where should you be doing gigs? Or where shouldn't you be doing gigs? All of that information is in the back end of Spotify, and that is how you get it out. But the other part of this is how we can actually start putting in some information into our Spotify profile. Now, the reason why this is important is because at the moment, if we have a look at what we've got with Pistol Whip, yes, we've got the band name, yes, we've got the artwork for the CD single, but that is also replicated above, and there's no band logo, there's no band picture, there's no band bio. So we want to tell Spotify who we are. We also want to tell our audience who we are. But the other thing we want to do is we want to tell Spotify that we love you and we are taking you seriously, so you need to take us seriously. So the first thing I'm going to do, and you're going to hate me for this, is I am going to put in another artist and we are going to compare. Now bear with me and don't hate me or hit the dislike button for this. I'm picking someone who is #1 at the moment and is a little bit yummy. That's right, I am picking our old friend, The Biebs. Justin Bieber, and you don't need to be a believer. This is not about whether you like him, whether you hate him. This is someone who has a multi-million-pound marketing strategy. So if we can nick a couple of ideas, then I'm all up for that. So the one thing you notice when you go into his profile, apart from that little blue tick, which you can have too, is he hasn't got a tiny little picture. He's got a banner. And that is the first thing that you're going to see. That is good real estate. Now, after that, the next thing, it says in the overview, it says the latest release. It says the artist pick. Obviously, it's got the tracks, but underneath that, it's also got merch. So you can actually click on the merch within Spotify. Then after that, it's got the albums. But then as you scroll along, you've got the fans also like, and if you like Justin Bieber, you might like these other people. Then after that, you've got the About section. Now check this out. In the About section, there are 15 more pictures other than the 3 pictures that are on the main About section. And then underneath that, there is a bio, and that bio is paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. It's saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I stand for, and that is really important. Then it's got some numbers, and then after that, it's got all of his socials. It's got Instagram, it's got Twitter, he's got Facebook, he's even got his Wikipedia page. Then after that, it's got the playlists that he has recently been featured on. So you can see the playlists are saying, yeah, okay, we'll feature you. We can see you're taking it serious. And the playlists are very interesting. They start small and build up. It's very unlikely that you're just going to jump straight into today's top hits. But you might jump into some smaller playlists and the algorithm might grow, and then it's like a tree. All of a sudden, these roots are growing throughout Spotify. But then more than that, you can put your concerts in. Now, this reminds me of the old MySpace pages. If anyone remembers the old MySpace page, yeah, that's right, you all left me, and it's just me and Tom at the end, if you remember Tom from MySpace. But you can see all of the locations that this guy is going to go on tour. So this is saying to the fan base, here is all the information, and therefore keeping people on Spotify just for a bit longer. And because of that, Spotify rewards you. Now, let's go back off Justin Bieber. Please don't hate me for Justin Bieber. Let's go back to Pistol Whip. Again, big fan of this band. So now we go back and we compare. What we've got is, we have got the band name. I don't quite know what they're about from the artwork. I can see that there's a guitar, great, but I don't really know what they stand for until I click the music. So we're saying to people, there's only the music to judge us on and nothing else. Then after that, when we start scrolling down, there's no more information. When we click on the About section, no information whatsoever, but there's 21 monthly listeners and 12 followers. And in concerts, gigs, none. There's none. Not only are there none in Brighton, where I am, but there's none around the world. But I bet you this band a gig, and I bet you they've got gigs. I bet you they can start putting this stuff on Spotify. So in order to do this stuff, you need Spotify for Artists. And it's very, very simple. Step 1, you download the app. And step 2, you claim your profile. And once you are logged in, you have full access. And it is really interesting if you don't have Spotify for Artists when you first go in. The one thing I would say is it does start to get a little addictive, as it does with YouTube, when you start noticing your numbers going up or down, which is even worse, and you start getting a little bit addicted. So be careful of that. But very, very interesting reading. Now you're showing your Spotify some love, and you need to make sure that all of the information that you're putting in is answering the key questions. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you stand for? What do you look like? Where can I find more about you? All of the key questions that people want to know when they've heard one track, or maybe haven't heard a track, but have just stumbled across your music from maybe a playlist. Okay, before we start looking for artists or submitting music to get into playlists, we need to do one more thing. We need to start populating this with some numbers. Again, this is algorithm based, and a lot of the playlists nowadays are algorithm based, and I know that Spotify are pushing more and more for algorithm based playlists because it makes sense. If millions of people are listening to a track, Spotify says it's obviously a track I need to share to more people. If nobody is listening to a track, maybe I shouldn't be showing that to so many people. It's as simple as a binary code. So when you release your single, you need to start pointing people in the direction of Spotify, of that single, and not just once, but on a regular basis. You need to start reminding people what they need to do. You need to make sure that all of your links point to your single. You need to make sure that your email signature points to your single. You need to make sure that every day you're putting out stories and content and saying, by the way, I need you to go to Spotify and just listen to the track. And if they are fans, the other thing you can do is say, can you do us a favor? Can you add our track into a playlist, or make a playlist but add our track in? All of these tiny details do get picked up by Spotify, and they do make a big difference. You have to remember that Spotify is a digital automated version of the music industry of old. It is kind of like a gatekeeper, which is if you don't put in the proof, you can't come in. Okay. Now the juicy bit. How are we going to get your music onto Spotify playlists? Firstly, we're going to deal with Spotify owned and Spotify curated playlists. So effectively, the playlists which are owned and managed by Spotify, which are slightly different from individual playlists. Now, if you're releasing a single on Spotify, it does help to get in early. In fact, you can submit a track to Spotify for playlist consideration 4 weeks before that track comes out on Spotify. But you can do it a week in advance, but that is a bit squeaky bum time, and I probably wouldn't recommend it. So why not get in early, 3 or 4 weeks in advance of your single release? And the way you do this, again, it's in Spotify for Artists. You are allowed to submit a track to Spotify playlists, but don't forget, if you haven't put in the groundwork, why are they going to put it in? It's not like they're just going to listen to it. Some computer's going to listen to it and go, it's bloody genius. What they're going to do is they're going to go into all of your analytics and see what's working and what isn't, and see if and where it fits into the Spotify system. Okay, let's talk a little bit about playlists. Now, playlists come in all sizes, but the big ones tend to be owned by labels or big radio stations. So it's very, very competitive at the top. And what we've got to do is we've got to be smart. So if we've got a niche, or if we can find real small or growing playlists to get onto, that starts the ball rolling. That builds that momentum. It's a bit like radio. You get your big hitters, you get your Radio 1, you get your national radio stations, then you get your local radio stations, and then after that you get your hospital radio stations and your college radio stations, and everything is different size, and you've got to be realistic and do your research in order to find the right fit for you and your experience and your music and your genre. But just like radio, you can build up. You can build from hospital to college to local to national radio. Now, there are other playlists that are owned by labels. Again, very competitive. So if you're looking at Topsify or Filter's owned by Sony, Topsify I think is owned by Warner. If you're looking at those size playlists, then again, very big, very competitive to get onto. So if you look at some of these playlists that I found, you've got Charts 2020, that's a relatively medium sized 130,000, but Fresh Finds, that is big for new music. Fresh Finds, 700,000 followers. That's a big one to get onto. Then you've got things like Global Funk, Your Coffee Break. There's plenty of kind of emerging artist playlist that you can target. Now, Fresh Finds, which is really interesting, this one is an algorithm-based playlist. So it isn't a person choosing what goes in it. It is Spotify's algorithm figuring out what will work and what won't, and then put it in, which is why you have to give all of the information and the momentum for it to be picked up by something like Fresh Finds. So what about non-Spotify owned playlists? Effectively, curators that actually do the hard work, kind of like old school radio DJs. They choose the music, they make the show. Well, there are plenty of playlists, but those tend to be owned by radio stations or music journalists or bloggers or YouTubers or even celebrities, but they are people that you can get hold of. Now, many of these curators have their own blog as a way not only of getting hold of them, but in order to show off what they're already doing. So how do you find these Spotify curators? In fact, someone asked me that the other day, and whilst I was talking, I was thinking, they're not hidden away in some secret lair. They want to be found because they're trying to find new music. The same way as radio DJs, radio pluggers, A&R, their job is to go and find new songs, new material, new music, new bands, new artists. So they are there to be found. Your job is to put the research in to actually find them. Now, how you approach them, now that is a much bigger question. So here's a few tips for approaching Spotify curators. Number one, be realistic with who you are approaching. For example, if your band is called Fetus Eater, then maybe you're not going to try and get your music on Smash Hits or Charts 2020 because the fit doesn't match, and all you're going to be doing is wasting your time and pissing people off. By the way, if your band is called Fetus Eater, then I probably want to hear from you. Tip number two, make sure your house is in order. What we have just been discussing, this is so important. Don't try and skip the queue until this stuff is done. Until you start getting momentum and showing Spotify some love, it is not worth trying to skip the queue and going straight for an ask. And on that note, tip number three, make sure you are patient and try and build a relationship with someone rather than going straight in for an ask. That happens all of the time to me, and it's so frustrating when someone will pop up on my YouTube or in my Instagram DMs and on my emails and just say, here's my new song, can you promote it on your Instagram? And I just think, I don't know, who are you? I don't know about your music, I don't know about you, I don't know about your story or your history or where you've come from or what you stand for. You've just gone straight in for an ask, and the answer is always going to be no. Start with building a relationship. Don't start with the dick pic. Tip number four, when you're talking to a Spotify curator, always have in the back of your mind what is in it for them. It's obvious what's in it for you, but it's the same thing as when you're a radio DJ. When you're a radio DJ, you have got time to fill, yes, but your number one job is to get people to listen. I want more people to listen tomorrow than they did today, and I want to build that audience, and I want people to talk, and I want people to enjoy it so that they come back. So therefore, what is in it for them rather than just giving you your break? If you can explain what you are doing with your marketing strategy or how you're pushing the single, more importantly, how you are pushing people across to listen to the track on Spotify, especially on their playlists, it starts to give them some reasons to put you in the playlist. It's like a deal. If you do this, I will do this. And that way they can start to weigh up whether it is worth it for them, apart from just, do they like the music? Tip number five, make sure all of your marketing is pointing in the direction of Spotify. This is the single, this is what I need you to do. You always need to remember when it comes to marketing, you are holding people's hand through the journey. This is what I need you to do next, or this is what you need to do next, so that they know. If you give them 5 things to do, they'll probably do none of them, so just give them one thing to do. Go and listen to this on Spotify. Tip number 6, this one's a big one. Don't buy onto playlists. Now, the reason for this is they're probably going to be fake numbers, and if they're fake numbers, they're not helping you. The people from the music industry are going to see, and they're not going to buy into it. They're not going to believe you. You can also get kicked off Spotify. You're just wasting your time. You're wasting your money. It's an egocentric thing that people would do. The same thing as buying likes on YouTube. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Also, think of it from someone who's building a playlist. If they're just allowing you to just jump on it through money, then they're probably not taking their audience seriously, and it's probably a fake playlist. Because when you build a YouTube channel, when you build a playlist, you pour your heart and soul, and it isn't just a financial decision. So just don't bother. Tip number 7, look into platforms like Submit Hub. Now, Submit Hub is a weird thing. It's kind of like, it's a platform that allows you to submit tracks to playlists and bloggers for money, and you can get feedback, or you can just get a yes or no answer. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's a good thing depending on the artist. It's really good to get feedback. Don't forget, some of the feedback, if you've seen anything from Submit Hub, some of the feedback can be brutal. So just make sure that if you are going to do that, you can take the heat, you can take the feedback. But It is a way to actually get in front of people, and there is a good chance that if your music is good enough and if you've done the right thing, it can be a good introduction, and it can get you on those blogs and on those playlists. And my last tip for this is think about single 10 and not single number 1. Honestly, this is the biggest bit of advice, because when you're going in at single number 1, thinking of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you are building something. If you are putting everything into single 1 and hoping that that does everything that you want it to, not only are you going to be disappointed probably, but then it's going to hamper the next single and the next single. Whereas if you think of this as building blocks, this is what I'm going to do in single number 1 so that when I get to single number 10, I'm going to smash it. You are so much more likely to get to single number 10 and be where you want to be. So that should help you get started on Spotify. So a couple of things. A big thank you to Pistol Whip for making great music and hopefully not being angry with me for using their Spotify page. Also, massive thanks to Maddie from Burstamo. I don't know if you've seen their YouTube channel, but they do a lot of stuff on Spotify and Spotify playlists because they're working with bands on getting their music on Spotify regularly. And she gave me some great advice on that. So thanks, Maddie. And other than that, do me a favor, if you're going to like, subscribe, more importantly, come and be a part of this community because it's building every day, and I'm so proud of watching you guys grow and seeing the results. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.